I'm Maxwell. I have SMA Type 2 and I'm 19 years old and I'm currently a business management student. I'm joined by Graeme. I'll let Graeme introduce himself.
Thank you, Maxwell. Yeah, my name's Graeme O'Connor. I'm the research lead for Dietetics at Great Ormond Street, and I've been very lucky to have done some research in spinal muscular atrophy and type 1 in the past.
So today's podcast is on everything to do with food and diets. We have someone who really knows what they're doing here. So I'm going to give myself a little intro, a bit of background on my whole life of my journey on food. And so when I was younger, I used to get really tired. And so when I came home from school, I wouldn't really eat. And I became like really thin and frail. And so Great Ormond Street at the time offered me salbutamol to give me a bit more energy. And at the time I was on, I think it's called Scandi Shakes. Because I needed to put on a bit of weight and I wasn't eating anything. And my nutrition was really low. So I was put on these. I was put on salbutamol as well. And when I was put on salbutamol, I did get my appetite back and I had a lot more energy. I was feeling good about myself. But then I started putting on a bit too much weight. I did put on quite a bit. And then I kind of needed to pull that back and I had a really hard time losing weight. And then eventually I took myself off salbutamol, and it kind of coincided with my spine operation, which I had in 2017. And straight after my spinal fusion, I developed acid reflux for some unknown reason, and I didn't really eat that much. I would get sick every time I ate, and I'd kind of go maybe a day without eating, and then the next day I'd have to like force myself to eat, and I had this like really hard battle with it. So at this point I wasn't on salbutamol at all, and it's kind of taken up until I'd say the last year for me to put on some weight and get to a kind of a weight that I'm happy with. So Graeme, I want to ask you on any advice on trying to maintain a healthy weight throughout someone's life.
Yeah, it's just to go back to some of the points that you've made there. It's quite interesting because prior to a diagnosis of SMA, they often present with very poor growth and weight gain. And this faltering growth is due to the posture issues and swallowing problems. And so that's our mainstay, normally with treatment of SMA. It is trying to get their weight up. And often with this growth failure, we can sometimes use a feeding tube to get the calories and the energy in. And they'll often be on a dietitian so we can control that weight gain. But people with SMA type 2 and 3, they very much don't get that support. And the research that we see now, they do tend to get a little bit more overweight because of that reduced activity. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to sort of share my screen on and off. So just to help with this, so we just go, because sometimes it's a little bit easier just to go through this. I'm going to share my screen and I'll stop sharing in a moment. Hopefully you can see this.
Yeah.
Great. I'm just going to move this box out of the way that is on. So this is the classic sort of balance of good health and the balance of weight control that everyone is aware of. And it sounds so simple, but obviously calorie intake, so the meals that we're eating and the drinks and the snacks that we're having, this needs to be equal to our normal bodily function, our daily activity and our exercise, something we call our basal metabolic rate. And if that balance is slightly out of kilter, because often if our activity level reduces, that it can just mean the weight gradually increases. It's such a simple diagram, but it's so complex to try to control this. And I'm just, the next slide actually, I'd be interested to see how you manage to control the weight. This sometimes takes a while to slide for the first one. It might be. There we go. So interesting, a significant portion of successful weight loss is attributed to food intake as opposed to activity. And which is interesting because of course, activity is important, but it's what we actually eat that will really help us control that weight. And it's difficult because when we're not eating too much food, it means we might be missing out on certain nutrients as well. And when we're calculating the energy requirements for adult population, they will often say, you need 2,000 calories or 70 grams of fat, and that fits everybody. Whereas we know that if you're wheelchair bound or you have reduced activity, then 2,000 calories for a man or 1,500 calories for a woman is probably too much to help control that weight gain.
Yeah.
So if we break down the spinal muscular atrophy in terms of the non-sitters, the sitters, and the walkers, which is often how they're classified, we can actually calculate energy requirements quite relatively accurately. And these are predictive equations and something called the Schofield equation that we use. And this measures your basal metabolic rate. And this is just the number of calories that you and I will burn just to do our basic life state sustaining function. So looking at breathing, our thermoregulation, and then metabolic homeostasis. This is keeping all our biochemistry controlled. So this is the minimum amount of energy that we need in the day. Now, if you are doing a little bit more activity, that you are sitting and you're moving around, then we can add an activity factor onto that basal metabolic rate. And similarly for walkers, we can add a bit more of that activity factor on. So just going back to that, one of the largest nutritional concerns now for walkers with SMA type 2 and 3 is the risk of obesity, which we never used to see. So it's a very new sort of phenomena that we're picking up. And this is all related to the improvement in medication now and treatment for SMA. But the problem with obesity is that obesity comes with some of its friends, and the friends aren't particularly good for us. So these are your high blood cholesterol, your high blood pressure, and diabetes as well, which can all cause lots of problems. It's interesting because you mentioned that you were on salbutamol, and the medical team thought this will be helpful for you to increase your activity level, just your energy level. And they're absolutely right. But the reason why it increases your activity level is because of the prednisolone or the steroids that are within that salbutamol, which is often prescribed to help with your respiratory function. For asthmatics, they will be on this. So it's obviously worked for you in terms of activity level, but it would also increase your appetite because we know steroids would increase your appetite as well. And we were talking before, Maxwell, and you said that you actually weaned yourself off this salbutamol.
Yes, I did. Because I was just gaining way too much weight. And obviously as a child, I didn't really see that. But my parents were like, we need to get you on a diet. But then I kind of just naturally took myself off of it. I got to a point where I was too large.
Oh, no, well done for coming off it. I mean, obviously, if somebody is on salbutamol that's watching this, it is for their respiratory function, then it's really important to stay on that. And any signs of asthma as well, it's important to keep those two pumps.
I'm really interested in that you said that kind of like, obviously 2,000 calories might be quite a lot for me who's just like sitting here. And if I'm not doing a lot of moving as well. So would you say there's like an amount to aim for as someone who's sitting with SMA or?
So I would use this calculation to just go back. So it's called the Schofield equation. So everybody is individual. You can actually, all you need is your weight in kilograms and you can calculate your basal metabolic rate. It's quite
So you can calculate this online then?
Yeah. As long as you've got an accurate weight in terms of your kilograms. And then this will give you an idea of what your minimum level, the minimum that you need each day just to maintain your weight. Now, there's a few little caveats to this. So if somebody is overweight or they've got a very high muscle mass, then this can also change the way that basal metabolic rate works. So there's a few caveats, but we'd use this as a predictive formula. So you've got your weight, you can plug it into the Schofield equation to give you a marker. But then you need to add on these activity factors. So if you are moving around, like you're at university, Maxwell, so you're going to be in and out of classes, moving around. So you could what we have, the activity factors are ranged from like 1.1 up to 3. Like if you have a very manual job and you want to increase quite a large amount of activity.
Yeah.
So we can play around with that. But that's how I would say, so that the probably most effective way to look at your energy requirements, as opposed to the government guidelines, which are 2,000 calories for an adult, and that's assuming that person is mobile. But there's a good question just to to flag up. But or if you have access to a dietitian, they can calculate this for you as well, or just do it online. You can look at your energy requirements. But just with other medication as well, because I know a lot of young people with SMA will be on Spinraza or Risdiplam. And there's not a huge amount of research out there now. It is a relatively new area. But interestingly, even with these types of medication, it has been shown to increase the body mass index, particularly in young people with SMA2 and in the pediatric population. And so this is from the ages 3 to 12. They're noticing a slight increase.
I would say for me on this drug that I find it easier to eat because it's given me a little bit more energy. And so I find that it's basically just helping me to eat, so I would naturally eat a little bit more because I don't tire as much.
Do you know, that leads nicely onto the second paragraph here to show the mechanisms as to why we might be increasing the appetite. And it's to do with these anterior horn cells, which are within your paraventricular thalamus, which control your appetite. And nusinersen treatment potentially is impacting this and thereby increasing your appetite as a side effect of its effect on the spinal muscular neuron. So that's interesting you say that. And now, on the flip side of these medications, it can cause constipation and vomiting as well. And if you're constipated, this will cause delayed gastric emptying and then goes back to the reflux that you had. And then again, if you are constipated with reflux, it's going to make you eat less, and of course, if you're vomiting. Similarly with Zolgensma as well. So it's a very new area looking at medication and impact on diet, the way it affects your weight. So it's good to get your narrative on that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just because I feel like also a lot of people with SMA, myself included, don't drink enough water anyway. And I found like I had quite a knock-on effect when I had acid reflux, and I would bring up the liquid and I wasn't drinking enough anyway. And then I obviously got a little bit constipated as well. So then I didn't really want to eat as much. And so it kind of went around in a bit of a cycle.
Yeah. And you've linked perfectly here again the importance of fluid with constipation. We know the number one cause of constipation is dehydration. So by getting enough fluid in a day, which actually we're going to come on to, will help to resolve that a little bit. But again, if you're drinking lots of fluid, it needs to be the right type of fluid as well. So just some very basic weight loss advice. I'd be interested to hear what you managed to do, Maxwell. But these are the obvious foods that we have to that we should reduce because they're just very high, they're very energy dense and devoid of really important micronutrients. So these are our saturated foods, like saturated fats. So you've got cakes, biscuits, pies, crisps, chocolates, fast foods. So all the foods that we really love and enjoy to eat can be the ones that, have the most impact on our weight.
Yes.
And saturated fats, we just don't need them in our body. We don't use them. We just have these foods for comfort. And did you manage to? How do you control your weight at the moment, Maxwell? What are the main changes? Because I think you mentioned before you aim for a certain number of calories a day.
Yeah, so I aim for around like 1,000 calories a day. Now this might be completely different if I put this into your equation, but I tend to I eat quite a lot of meat, and kind of veg as well. I do enjoy the odd takeaway, I have to admit. But I do primarily eat quite a lot of meat. Now I don't know if this is true or not, but is it true that if it said, say, like 100 calories of protein, that it's harder to break down, so it's actually less calories?
Well, it's a very good question, because if something says, say, is 1,000 calories, what we actually absorb and break down, because we obviously have a lot of waste that we passes through. So what the calorie content is really looking at the total calorie of within that food, and so calorie just means how much energy it takes to burn up a certain amount of space within the body, which is actually 1 cubic centimeter, and that's what the calorie means. So it does account for how much we actually absorb within the body. But there are particular foods that we don't absorb particularly well. We do have a greater amount of waste from it. So it's a really good point you raise, because it's a very complex science of actually saying, if a product says it's 1,000 calories, how much do I actually absorb of that? And it, it's so variable, and each person is going to be variable, because you might absorb calcium really well, better than I can. So you don't need to eat as much calcium foods because your body's so good at absorbing it, whereas mine might not be as good. This is what we call the dietary reference nutrient intake, because we have a range, so we can make sure it covers the majority of the population. But fantastic question, Maxwell. And the problem is there's no easy answer to it, because we can only get a guide how much calories is in food. Moving on to the sugary drinks here and fruit juice. So you often see people drinking fruit juice because they think it's healthy, but unfortunately, there's sugar. It's sugar, and you could argue that it's fructose, which is a fruit sugar, so it doesn't cause such an insulin response as other sugars. But the problem is these are fruit sugars or the fruit juices from concentrate. So there often is a lot of extra sugar added in.
I mean, is it like the same as basically drinking like a full fat Coke?
Exactly, that's what I got over here. So you've got 20 grams of sugar in 100 mils, which is exactly the same as cola or any of those cola-based drinks. So it's calorie dense, and you also got risk of dental caries with these fizzy drinks and the fruit juices because the acid that's in them. And the phosphoric acid is particularly bad for bone health, because it competes with the calcium within the body. So you actually urinate more calcium. So if you are trying to lose weight, then you definitely need to avoid these sugary drinks. And even the low energy ones, the low calorie drinks still have got the phosphoric acid in it. And I don't know if you saw today in the press, but aspartame, which is a sweet,
I saw that,
has now been added to the carcinogen list from the World Health Organization.
Yeah, wow. No more Diet Coke.
Oh, I know, it's like a never ending, is it? But they've been toying with this idea for a long time. We're thinking that one of these sweeteners could be particularly bad for us. But it seems like there's more research coming out now. So yeah, ditch those fizzy drinks with the calorie.
I'm happy with this slide because I don't really have that much of a sweet tooth. So I'm quite happy here.
That's lucky. Yeah, I've got a terrible sweet tooth. So we've got the full fat dairy products here. So if you can go for the lower fat products, because what's important with the dairy products is they do have the calcium and the vitamin D added, and the phosphate, which is really important for bone health, which we're going to come on to actually. And then reducing the red meat, so going for lean options if you can, and removing the visible fat before you cook it, so you're not tempted to eat it after it's been cooked. And these are really important for your iron and zinc levels, which you get also from your pulses and lentils, which you wanted to replace meat, a couple of times a week. And also, mixed nuts. But actually, mixed nuts is great for zinc and selenium and your iron, but they're very high in energy, but really good type of fats, so polyunsaturated.
So, but like more lean, are we going towards like chicken kind of things for meat?
Yeah, the chicken and the turkey, these are your lean meat options that you can do. Or if you want to go for tofu and products. Yeah, so go for, just because they are, say, plant-based, doesn't necessarily mean they're healthy. So just to make sure they're not piling loads of extra fat into these products, but just your standard tofu that you can put, you've got an air fryer. Everyone's got air fryers now, or you can put them in the oven. So they can go really crispy, putting lots of flavors onto them. They taste really good. Probably the biggest change to help with weight loss is just reducing the portion sizes. And it's hard to do, but just putting less on the plate will make a huge difference. Maybe keep an eye on the amount of carbohydrates. I'm going to come on to the carbohydrates actually. And also, because I know, Maxwell, you mentioned before that you would eat maybe up to just 2 meals a day just to control your weight. But there's some interesting research about, because intermittent fasting is a huge industry in terms of controlling weight. But sometimes with SMA, glucose control with the body can be a little bit more complex. So we can be interested. I'm going to come back onto that in a moment. So I've got a slide to see what your experience was. We're just going to finish off these quickly. So getting your fruit and vegetables in. So these are really important antioxidants. They're what we call prebiotics. They feed the good bacteria in the gut. They're high in vitamin C, which helps absorption of iron from the foods that you're eating. Snacking is the biggest problem with weight loss, because we often forget that we've snacked on something.
Yeah.
You've got 200 calories, like in a couple of biscuits, 200, 300 calories. how long do you reckon that takes to burn off? Or if you're going to, I don't know, if you're going to do a swim or if you want a treadmill, how long do you think it takes to burn up 200, 300 calories?
I'm gonna say I'm gonna say maybe like 2 hours.
God, it's not far. It's about 25 minutes.
Oh,
So
really?
but you've had a couple of moments of just pleasure from eating your biscuits. That's about 25, 30 minutes of exercise just to balance that. So this is why it's going back to that main point that weight loss is really about diet, about what you're eating, as opposed to exercise. Because exercise is a bonus, but we can reduce those unhealthy snacks. It would just help us help control that weight, or even to lose weight if you needed to. So replacing the snacks with fruit if possible. Drinking plenty of water, because that fills you up throughout the day. So 8 glasses a day. It's about 1,500, 2,000 mils a day. And if you drink before you eat, drink after you eat, just to fill you up so you get that filling satiety. Because there's nothing worse than eating and still feeling hungry afterwards.
The worst feeling.
I think I jump on. Let me just see what's next on here. Sorry, it keeps jumping onto this. I think the next one. Oh, good, it is. Next slide. So intermittent fasting, it is, everyone's buzzing about it. It works really well. When it's good for usually is it controls your glucose control, your lipid levels, and there's lots of research to show that it is fantastic for weight loss and just for your what we call metabolic biochemistry. The problem is, if you do have SMA, we know that the liver doesn't always work at an optimal level. And there was a study here that showed that they think this is due to the low skeletal muscle mass, with the best explanation as to why people with SMA type 2 had an increased risk of hyperglycemia. That's when your blood sugars drop low during fasting. So if you are going to reduce your intake and you wanted to do intermittent fasting, you could feel very unwell if you do go into a hypo or your blood glucose drops. Now, when your blood glucose does drop, your body does kick in, and you get a hormone called glucagon, which will jump in to push your glucose back up.
Yeah.
But that can also make you feel very unwell once that glucagon has been released.
Is that something to do with like ketones or something?
Exactly, ketosis. Yeah. It's the same process. So brilliant, Matt. So that's exactly what happens. It just doesn't feel very nice. So just to be mindful, I mean, I think, you've managed to cut down to 2 meals a day when you were trying to control the weight. And people, your activity level is reduced. It's the only way that you can really manage to do that. But just to be mindful that intermittent fasting does work for a population that have a normal functioning liver, but if there are issues with liver function, and just to keep an eye out for how you might feel with a low blood sugar, which can make you feel a bit dizzy, you can feel a bit nauseous, you might get a sweat on.
So is there any foods that I should try to eat more of if I'm only eating 2 meals a day?
This is a great point. I'm going to come on to that as well, Maxwell, because the problem is when we're trying to reduce our intake and we have to cut out our food, we could be missing out on really important micronutrients. And the one that I particularly worry about is your calcium, your vitamin D, and your phosphate for bone health.
Yes.
Just going to this today. And I'm just going to check. I've got another couple of points here about the dieting. There's also ketogenic diet, which you mentioned before, which you just actually mentioned. But the ketogenic diet is very big, but it's very different to the intermittent fasting. They just cut out carbohydrates. But just again, I think the best way forward really would be to have your regular meals, if possible, up to 3 meals a day with the snacking, but just to reduce the portion sizes. But it's still very difficult to get all the micronutrients in. And the main area that I worry about is bone health. And the reason why it's a problem is that when we stop growing, it means that we really stop being able to put in these really important nutrients into our bones, so calcium and phosphate. So you can see here on this growth chart here, by the age of 20, we have pretty much finished growing, if not even before that, maybe 16, 17 sometimes. And so if you haven't met your peak bone mass at that age, then it's just a downward trend from there. And it's very, when we do, you can get some of those nutrients back in, but generally it's a downward spiral. And then for females, they're at particular risk during pregnancy. They can lose calcium losses from the bone if they're not getting enough calcium from their diet. And also
Yeah.
during the menopause, they can start to lose some bone health.
So does this link to the vitamin D as well with like bones?
Yes.
Because I, ever since I was young, I was always, I didn't have enough vitamin D.
Right.
So I was put on supplements because I had really, really weak bones.
Yes.
And that was a problem they wanted to fix really quickly, which I'm still on actually.
Good. Vitamin
Yeah.
D is a wonderful micronutrient, a wonderful fat soluble vitamin. So carry on with it. It's a bit like the new super vitamin that we know about. It has so many benefits, even in terms of mental health and respiratory function. We know that when I was working on the intensive care unit during COVID, a lot of patients were coming in that were really bad, had depleted vitamin D stores. And we know that vitamin D is really important for your respiratory function. So carry on taking it. You mentioned the reason why vitamin D is important for bone health is because it's needed for the absorption of calcium and phosphate. So if we don't have vitamin D, we can't actually absorb the calcium. So it's great. When did you last get your vitamin D level checked since you started the supplements?
Oh, I would say it's done most times that I go for my Spinraza. So
they check.
Yes, yeah,
good. I would definitely stay on it, because even if you are eating lots of calcium, which is fantastic, and you're getting your vitamin D and your bone health is there, the problem when you're not weight bearing in the activity, this is one of the most important parts of having healthy bones, is having weight bearing exercise. So by not having that, it does increase your risk of those brittle bones or osteoporosis, which I've got a slide to come on to. But you can see here, look at the calcium requirements for a young adult and adolescent, looking at about 800 to 1,000 milligrams a day. And then if you look at this, what this practically means, it is a lot of calcium-containing foods you need to eat a day, and at least 3 or 4 portions of these high calcium foods. So you've got your skimmed milk here. So skimmed milk is actually higher in calcium than full fat milk, because when they take out all the fat, they actually put in a lower energy milk in to make it up to get the extra calcium in. So you actually get more calcium in your skimmed milk. And if you don't drink dairy, if you are a vegan and you've got the milk alternative, just make sure they do add calcium and vitamin D into that oat milk or rice milk that you're using. Low fat yogurts, again, about 200 milligrams, but make sure when it is low fat, they're not added in loads of sugar as a compromise. And then the hard cheese, here you've got lots of calcium, and then broccoli and spinach. But you can see, you're going to need a good, 3 or 4 portions of these a day, if not 4 or 5 portions, to get anywhere near those calcium requirements. That's why a multivitamin is often quite useful, just to help cover yourself when you're on a weight-reducing diet, to make sure you get those micronutrients.
Because I feel like maybe trying to get in this much calcium might be quite problematic with like calorie-wise sometimes as well. Yeah.
And it's that balance. And whenever you're losing weight and you're trying to lose weight, you're going to compromise micronutrients. And that's why multivitamin, anything over the counter is great. And making sure you have these multivitamins with food when you eat, just to help with the absorption of those fat soluble vitamins within the within the supplements. It's got lots of complexities within that normal bioavailability. So looking at vitamin D, because it's very difficult to find in the diet. So vitamin D deficiency has been reported throughout the world. It's actually a huge issue across the globe. As we've mentioned, it's really important for your calcium and phosphate absorption. And it's probably more important than calcium supplementation in terms of improving your bone mineral density. So we need about 600 international units a day, or about 10 micrograms a day. The problem is the main source of vitamin D is from sunlight. So we need about 20 to 30 minutes of sunlight a day to get this vitamin D level really good for our winter stores, because it's a fat soluble vitamin, which means we can get about 3 to 4 months storage of it in our liver.
Really?
Yeah, so it's good. It does sit around and we can use it for a while. The issue is if you have sunscreen, because of course skin cancer is a big problem and we worry about skin cancer, but if you have sun cream, it blocks the vitamin D conversion in the skin, because the vitamin D is converted within the skin, then it converts in the kidneys and then the liver.
Oh, wow.
So it's a bit of a balancing act. You want to get outside, get a bit of sunshine,
but
And
try not to get burnt.
get not to get burned, and then
Yeah.
you put on your sun cream afterwards, so you get that vitamin D dose.
So it is good to get your dose before the winter hits, get enough of it, because it is stored for the winter.
Yes, absolutely. And
Okay.
the northern hemisphere is much more difficult, and again, depending on your skin color. So if you've got darker skin, you've got much more melanin in the skin, so you need to be in the sun even longer to get that
Oh,
vitamin D
right.
conversion.
Yeah.
So it does depend on where someone's very fair skinned, they won't need as much time because of the melanin levels.
Yeah.
So this is why, again, vitamin D supplementation, if you're taking a vitamin D supplement, it's one of the best supplements to take, and I would highly recommend it for anybody, because it's just everyone seems to be low in vitamin D at the moment. There are some foods are fortified with it, so they add it. So you've got your oily fish will actually have it naturally, and then eggs will have it. But you'll notice in a lot of the shops, they will add vitamin D to eggs, even to breads, just to help with that intake. This was just an interesting study, again, that was looking at wheelchair-bound individuals. And it was a small study of 75 patients who had inadequate intake of vitamin D at their initial consultation. And their vitamin D and calcium intakes correlated positively with their bone mineral density. So there was that link there, what we were talking about. And again, by just taking that vitamin D intake over a few months, they did notice an improvement in the bone mineral density. So you're doing the best thing, Maxwell, by taking that vitamin D supplement at the moment for your bone health.
Yeah.
And it's a nice study, this is for wheelchair bound ones. And this is going back to the importance of exercise. So I've got a couple of slides here, but it'd be good to hear what you do, Maxwell, in terms of activities and what you could recommend for people within a chair.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I was younger and I could weight bear, I would get out in my standing frame as much as possible. I think I would stand probably twice a day when I was younger, and I used to do all of my tasks while I was standing, because it was good to balance as well for my core body. But now I tend to focus on upper body, so I do a lot of hand bike to try and get my heart pumping. I do a lot of TheraBand resistance training, and I also try and get out in the pool as much as possible as well, because that's kind of just like all of my muscles, and I get really tired after that as well. So I know that I'm wearing myself out. Yeah.
Brilliant. That sounds great. And I think this, I mean, and again, the research has shown that just by doing this, but when if you can get a weight in your arm, and that again helps with the bone density. So you're doing everything right there by just getting as much activity.
And there are quite light weights that you can get offline as well, because I obviously know it's quite hard to go to the gym because the weights will be like 10 kilograms minimum, but you can get quite like smaller weights online. I have like a little dumbbell which is 500 grams, which I like to push around, and just kind of extend my arms out as much as I can. So
that's brilliant. And you just reminded, during COVID, actually, there was a lot of people panicking about not getting to the gym. And unfortunately, there was as in any of these situations, there's always these scammers that are out there. So just be careful when you do book, if you do buy some stuff from the internet, that it is reputable. Because lots of people were trying to buy weights on the internet during the pandemic, and the money disappeared and nothing arrived.
really,
I know it's terrible, isn't it? Any scheme. So this is just some points before we've got some more bits to discuss about practicalities that we can go through, and also some of this social side stuff. But just here, just think about multivitamin, and we've discussed about vegan and plant-based lifestyles, and they just always mean it's more healthy because they might add in more fat in there. And try not to have unhealthy foods in the house, because it doesn't matter whatever your intentions are. And when you are on a weight loss diet, it needs to be for a month or two, and then you can relax once you got down to a happy weight. But during that time, you just need the family support, because if it doesn't take much, you think, oh God, I really fancy a bit of chocolate or some crisps. And if it's in the house, it's just going to be
easy to get. It's so much more effort to go to the shop and buy it.
Exactly.
Then So would you say, I have a question about fish actually. Is fish like quite a good thing to eat because of like the nutrients in it? And I know it's not that calorific either. Um,
And the types of fat that's in fish, what we call polyunsaturated, are really good for us as well. So
yeah,
you can get your white fish like your cod and your haddock, which are really low energy, um, and great protein source. But if you want to go for your salmon or your tuna, they've got big
yeah,
types of fats in them as well. And
yeah,
so I would definitely say as an alternative to meat, to reduce your red meat and to replace it with the oily fish, so even like mackerels. So again, there's still the energy and the calories in these. And when you do buy these fish, if you do buy it in the tins, make sure you buy it in the brine or spring water as opposed to the oil. And
yeah.
because even though olive oil is great, it's still a lot of calories that you're going to have to burn up. So just buying the spring water, that's a great idea there. And if you do know there's some difficult times in the day or just before you go to bed that you find you're really hungry, there's some good research again that show that if you do an activity that's got hand and eye coordination, so like knitting, crochet, jigsaw puzzles,
Yeah.
computer games, these are supposed to be really good to take your mind off it. Because we know that cravings pass within about 2 minutes. So if you get a craving for food,
Okay.
it will go in about 2 minutes' time. But watching TV doesn't actually make any difference. So that keeps your craving there. But by just doing something quite active can help reduce that. Keeping a food diary as well. This can be quite helpful. So you could just keep an eye on what you're eating. Because I think sometimes we forget how much we might be snacking on. And by keeping a really honest food diary, we can look through and think, okay, this is what I need to cut out on a little bit here.
I would agree. I think in our house we've tried to reduce the amount of snacks that we have. And before you'd eat a packet of crisps and you wouldn't even realize, like you would generally just forget that you
Yeah,
ate them
we've all
that
done.
morning.
Yeah, and absolutely, I know there's chocolate around. You grab a few bits. Absolutely. There was a few questions you had about practicalities as well, but I mean, the ideas that you came up with, brilliant.
It's,
And
I mean, I feel like there's quite a lot we can be doing. Like even though if we're, sitting in a chair, there's a lot that we can be moving around still, and there's a lot of exercises that we can be doing. And I have like quite a lot of videos on my Instagram about the different like routines that I do.
so can you share that with it? Well, maybe on the link somewhere, Maxwell, so when people log into this, they
Yeah,
can log
definitely.
on to your, if you've got, that'd be fantastic. Sorry to interrupt, go on.
No, because obviously it's about weights as well, but anything really around the house, like balls, or I might just get like a can of tomatoes and like just push it along the table. Any of these movements are like just great, and obviously they're great from like a trying to keep the weight down point of view, but also with SMA, you've got to keep your muscles moving to maintain them as well. So
Brilliant.
anything, yeah.
That sounds great. I love that you've got an Instagram account that can help for that. That'd be a brilliant link if you didn't mind people going into that. And there's some really good points that were brought up before about if we had any advice around the practical side of things that might help people with that have quite, if their SMA is quite advanced. I think this is like, specialist occupational therapists and physios work really well in this area, and they can do, they can change like the table heights. Were these your suggestions actually, Maxwell, about changing the table heights, arranging for power chairs to ensure the best and safest?
They weren't my suggestions, but I can probably say quite a lot on this because I think the position that you eat does matter quite a lot. And straight after my spinal operation, because all of my position and posture had moved around, I felt that I was kind of weaker when I was eating. It was also a longer way to my mouth as well, because my torso was suddenly a lot straighter. So I would tilt the back of my chair backwards a bit and it'd bring my armrest up so I could kind of balance my elbows or my armrest to get to my mouth a lot easier. I think having a table higher up or putting your chair lower down if your chair does go down also helps a lot because it just reduces the range of movement that you need to take the fork or the spoon to your mouth if you're struggling to feed yourself. Yeah.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. Fantastic. There was a bit more information here about which, not drinks, but what drinks we should have, which I don't think I really mentioned because we're saying drinks are important, but not to drink fruit juices. The drinks that come up really well are the low-fat milk alternatives, or the low-fat milks are fantastic, and diluted squash. But water is also fine. That if you drink water, it's better to have it after a meal because of the
Okay.
absolute. If you drink water on an empty stomach, it
Yeah.
actually drains out a lot of nutrients and electrolytes from the body.
Oh,
So this
really?
is why often if someone is unwell, they come into hospital, we put them on a saline that's got either glucose within it or
Yeah.
some electrolytes to help with the absorption of that. So to have water on its own can be not so useful, especially after an exercise, but can reduce um, the amount of fluid that's actually absorbed.
So would you say there's like a drink that's like the right balance, which is hydrating and okay for that?
These milk alternatives are
Yeah.
skimmed milk is also in a lot of the literature to show as a really healthy hydration liquid, especially during exercise. We're doing a lot of activity as well.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be helpful, but water again is absolutely fine if you are eating. And I've got here as well about the low calorie fizzy drinks because of the phosphoric acid competes with calcium, which we've touched on already.
Yeah.
Did you want to go on to the social side? That was a really interesting area.
Yeah. Well, I think I think it all came around, I'd say, after my spinal operation, and I just didn't get along with eating that much because I was weaker, and I found that I was quite embarrassed to actually like eat in public because I found it a lot harder. And I know some people with worse SMA have their carers feed them or they're fed by a tube, but from me going to be able to feed myself to suddenly really struggling
Yeah.
took quite like an effect on me. And that's also when I started losing quite a lot of weight as well, because at school I wouldn't want to eat around other people. And so, yeah, no, I just lost so much. And I think for me, like getting out of that really, it was really hard, but I just had to put myself in those situations more.
Yeah.
Because you have to get used to it. It's something that's not going to go away. And I just had to push myself to be in those situations where I did have to eat in front of people, and just really gain my confidence. So yeah, I'd say definitely to anybody who's listening, like if you're embarrassed to eat in front of anybody else, then you're not alone. I feel like quite a lot of people go through it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know, I remember I was reading this in this show. Thank you so much for sharing this, Maxwell, because you just shed light on it. And, it's an incredibly emotive situation, but it affects so many people as well as in this situation. I mean, I've worked in eating disorders for 20 years. I've written clinical guidelines for dietitians on anorexia nervosa. And it's not only going to get into this point, but it's just being mindful of these types of eating behaviors that might be creeping in when people try to lose weight, we can always take it to the excessive stage. And low self-esteem can be one of these many precursors that goes into causing these disordered eating. And it's just keeping an eye out for it. So, making sure that you're not getting too obsessive with the exercise or counting the calories, and even just talking to, family members about it, just by naming it, saying, oh, actually, I'm a bit worried that I might be exercising too much, or I'm getting way too focused on the calories, or I'm worried about my body shape. It's just being mindful of it. And it's so really helpful that you've raised it, because it's incredibly emotive. But just make sure you've got family and friends around to say that you might be struggling a little bit. And if it is getting out of control, taking it to the health professional to say, look, this has gone too far now. I can't get back onto it. But thank you so much for actually,
I completely agree though. Like, I think it was my partner who first said, Max, I think you might be counting calories a little bit too much. You might, I see that you lack confidence when you're eating around other people. And I was like, yeah, I do. And they kind of, you have to realize yourself as well, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes, and it's such a fine balance, because when we're trying to lose weight, of course, we've got to be much more mindful about what we're eating, what we're doing. But it's when it goes to that next level that's taking over, and you're just getting obsessed with it. And it's that, some people are absolutely fine with dieting. They just get back on the wagon and start eating. It's fine. But some people take things very literally and just get stuck with it. And just by mentioning this in this webinar is so important, Maxwell. So thank you so much for being honest in the first place, for saying, you experienced this, because you won't be the only person. And just the fact that someone can hear this as well and know that they question if it's gone too far or not is brilliant.
Definitely, yes. I have a question for you actually. So I think a lot of people, especially when they get older with SMA, really struggle to lose weight. And I was having a conversation with my friend, and we basically take two different kind of like ideas to it. And he eats really smallly but often, and I eat less meals but they're bigger. And so scientifically, what is the best way? I know everything works for different people, but yeah, just scientifically, what's the best way?
Do you know what? 10 years ago, they would have said small and often is really important.
Yeah.
And I think that is, and again, with SMA in terms of the metabolism, it might be better to do small amounts. But then if you look at all the research, looking at intermittent fasting and the benefits that has on the metabolic syndrome in terms of your glucose and your lipids.
Yeah.
I think one size does not fit all, and it definitely doesn't work. If you find having 2 meals a day is better for you than having the constant small meals, then I would definitely work with that. And I would never say that anybody would do one way or the other, like one size doesn't fit all at all. But then there's pros and cons for both. So if it works for you, Maxwell, stick with that. And with your friend, small and regular meals, perfect, and snacks in between, that's just as good. And just keep an eye out for those hyperglycemic events. If someone has if they are more advanced SMA,
yes,
the small regular meals might work really well in terms of the glucose control. But for yourself, you think, twice a day. I mean, I prefer to do that as well. I love intermittent fasting, and it works really well.
Yeah.
But, each to their own.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it was really nice that you also touched on like the calcium and things like that. Because I feel like also people with SMA struggle chewing and eating on certain foods as well.
Yeah.
And so I think you said to try and cut out red meat, which was nice. But also people with SMA struggle to eat that kind of food anyway. Especially like your steak or something like that. It can be really hard to eat. So I think like tofu and things like that are quite naturally a lot softer.
So yeah, you're right. And even like the minced meat, you get minced turkey as well, which might be easier to eat. But I would definitely go for the plant-based foods. That protein source is potentially better for the body anyway than having an animal source. And what's nice about a plant-based diet is that you can still have meat, but just have it, a couple times a week, or so it's not the mainstay of the diet. But the tofu and the corn, it is definitely more manageable in terms of the abilities of like that up actually in the softer foods.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, I think I've touched on everything that I have to ask you.
Yeah, it's been a joy. Maxwell, you are a fantastic advocate for the SMA. It's been such a joy to meet you. So thank you so much for bringing. Well, actually, I think they reached out because of your lovely email.
Yeah, on my video online as well. Because because they saw that I was doing some exercise videos, and I also talked about my insecurities as well on eating food as well. So it came from that as well.
Brilliant. No, well done for being so open, because it's hard, and I don't think people understand. But there'll be other people in this situation, and you've helped them think, "Oh, good, it's not just me." So,
yeah,
great job. Well done.
Thank you so much. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there then. Thank you so much for coming as well. I've learned so much as well.
Good,
which has been amazing. And it's just nice to hear, like about the salbutamol as well. Yes. I wasn't really told about that. That it would increase my appetite that much. So yeah, it's nice to hear that from you.
Yeah, it wasn't you.
Yeah.
The drugs, it's always the drugs.
Definitely. So thank you. And if you want to reach out to SMA UK, you can on the website, and get in contact with them with email if you have any other questions. Thank you for watching.